In 1975, a 24-year-old engineer walked into a room holding a toaster-sized box of wires and lenses. He called it a filmless camera. His bosses looked at it, looked at him, and basically said, "Interesting toy, don't bother us with it again." That engineer worked for Kodak. He had just invented the digital camera, and the company that owned it buried it in a drawer. 20 years later, Kodak was still the biggest name in photography on Earth. Fast forward to 2012, bankrupt, gone, a punchline. This, right here, is the whole show. Welcome to What Went Wrong. Today, 5 giants, 5 collapses, 1 brutal pattern hiding underneath all of them. All right, let's start with the one everybody thinks they already know. Picture this, 1996. Kodak isn't just a camera company, it's the brand. 90% of film sold in America has that yellow box on it. The stock is a Wall Street darling. Parents are buying disposable Kodaks for every birthday party, every graduation, every trip to Disney World. The company employs over 140,000 people. And buried somewhere in their own patent files, the digital camera, invented in-house by their own guy, Steven Sasson. So why didn't they run with it? Here's the ugly truth. Film was insanely profitable. We're talking 60 to 70% margins on every roll. Digital, meanwhile, was expensive, clunky, and, worst of all, it would eat their own business alive. Executives ran the math and basically thought, why would we kill the golden goose to chase a shaky, low-margin future? Classic innovator's dilemma. Textbook. They weren't blind to digital. They were scared of it. So they sat on the patent, licensed pieces of the tech to other companies instead of building their own product line aggressively. Meanwhile, Canon, Sony, and eventually smartphone makers just ran past them. By the time Kodak scrambled to launch its own real digital push in the early 2000s, the market had already crowned other winners. 2012. Chapter 11, Bankruptcy. A company that once was photography, reduced to selling off patents just to stay alive. The lesson: the thing that killed Kodak wasn't a lack of vision. They literally invented the future. It was the fear of cannibalizing a profitable present. Sound familiar? It should. It's happening in some boardroom right now as we speak. Now, this one hurts a little more because there's a moment, one single meeting, where the whole disaster could have been avoided. 2000. A scrappy little DVD by mail startup walks into Blockbuster's headquarters in Dallas. They're bleeding money, barely surviving, run by a guy named Reed Hastings. He offers to sell his company to Blockbuster. The price? $50 million. Blockbuster's leadership laughs him out of the building. That startup was Netflix. Look, in fairness, at the time, this wasn't a crazy call. Blockbuster had 9,000 stores, billions in revenue. Netflix was a niche experiment mailing red envelopes to a handful of nerds. But here's where it gets interesting. Blockbuster's entire business model was built on late fees. Something like 16% of their revenue came directly from charging people for returning movies late. Netflix's whole pitch was no late fees, ever. Adopting that model meant gutting their own cash cow. Sound familiar? It's Kodak all over again, just with VHS tapes instead of film. Blockbuster tried, eventually, launched their own online service, even beat Netflix to certain features at one point. But by then it was too little, way too late, and burdened by a mountain of corporate debt from a leveraged structure that left almost no room to maneuver. 2010. Bankruptcy. Today there's exactly one Blockbuster left on the entire planet. A single store in Bend, Oregon, kept alive basically as a tourist attraction and a meme. The lesson: Sometimes the $50 million mistake isn't the deal you made, it's the one you laughed out of the room. Okay, shift gears. In 2007, Nokia controlled roughly 50% of the entire global mobile phone market. Half of the world. The Nokia 3310 wasn't just a phone, it was basically indestructible folklore. A running joke about how you could survive a car crash and your Nokia would still have signal. Then, January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs walks on stage, pulls a rectangle out of his pocket. Nokia executives, by most accounts, watched that keynote and weren't that worried. Why would they be? The iPhone had no physical keyboard, which Nokia's own research said customers hated. Battery life was mediocre. Early units were buggy. On paper, it looked like a toy for tech bloggers, not a threat to a manufacturing juggernaut that could produce hundreds of millions of durable, cheap, reliable phones a year. But Apple wasn't really selling a phone. It was selling a platform, an ecosystem. Touchscreens, app stores, a whole new relationship between a person and their pocket computer. Nokia kept refining hardware, better cameras, tougher bodies, longer battery life, while the entire industry pivoted toward software and experience. Internally, Nokia's operating system, Symbian, became a mess, fragmented, clunky, painful for developers to build for. By the time Nokia partnered with Microsoft in 2011 to build Windows phones, hoping for a comeback, it was already a two-horse race between iOS and Android. Nobody was waiting around for horse number 3. 2013. Microsoft buys Nokia's phone division for around $7 billion, a fraction of what Nokia was once worth. The brand that basically invented the modern mobile industry got reduced to a footnote in someone else's story. The lesson. Nokia didn't lose because their phones got worse. They lost because the entire definition of what a phone even is changed underneath them, and they kept winning a competition that had already ended. This one's different. This one isn't really about missing a trend, it's about debt. In the year 2000, Toys R Us made a decision that seemed almost harmless at the time. They signed a 10-year exclusivity deal, handing their entire online sales operation over to Amazon. In exchange, Amazon would feature Toys R Us prominently and pay them a chunk of money annually. Think about that for a second. The largest toy retailer in America just outsourced its future to the company that would eventually become the largest retailer, period, on the internet. Amazon, naturally, didn't hold up their end quietly. They let third-party sellers list toys anyway, violating the spirit, if not the letter, of the deal. Toys R Us sued, actually won, and got out of the agreement in 2006. But the damage was structural. They'd spent 6 critical years building basically zero e-commerce infrastructure or digital capability, while Amazon spent those same years becoming an unstoppable machine. Then, 2005, a separate gut punch, a leveraged buyout. Private equity firms, Bain Capital, KKR, Vornado, bought Toys R Us for around $6.6 billion and loaded the company itself with the debt used to finance the purchase. That's the mechanism of an LBO in a nutshell. The company you're buying ends up paying for its own acquisition. Toys R Us was suddenly saddled with about $5 billion in debt, forced to pay roughly $400 million a year just in interest. Money that should have gone toward renovating stores, building a real website, competing with Amazon and Walmart. Instead, it just vanished into interest payments, year after year after year. 2017, bankruptcy filing. 2018, liquidation. Over 30,000 employees lost their jobs. Kids everywhere lost Jeffrey the giraffe. The lesson? Sometimes a company doesn't get killed by bad decisions about products or customers at all. Sometimes it gets killed by a spreadsheet, years before anyone even notices something's wrong. Last one, and honestly, maybe the fastest fall of them all. 2006. MySpace is the single most visited website in the entire United States. Bigger than Google. Bigger than Google. News Corp, Rupert Murdoch's empire, bought it in 2005 for $580 million. And at its peak, some estimates valued the platform north of $12 billion. Bands used it to build fan bases from nothing. It had customizable profiles, autoplay music, glittery layouts, chaotic, personal, weirdly artistic in a way social media, honestly, never quite replicated again. So what happened? A few things, stacked on top of each other. First, under News Corp's ownership, MySpace got treated primarily as an advertising vehicle. Every decision seemed to prioritize squeezing out ad revenue over improving the actual user experience. The site became cluttered, slow, genuinely painful to load half the time. Second, and maybe more important, a small startup called Facebook was quietly doing the opposite. Clean interface, no page customization chaos, real identity instead of anonymous handles. And critically, Facebook opened itself up to outside developers with a platform strategy, letting third parties build apps and games directly into the experience. MySpace, by contrast, kept things far more closed off. Third, and this one's almost poetic, MySpace's engineering team reportedly built the site on a patchwork of different programming languages over time, making it a nightmare to update, scale, or innovate on quickly. While Facebook shipped new features constantly, MySpace was fighting its own technical debt just to keep the lights on. By 2008, Facebook had overtaken it in monthly users. By 2011, News Corp sold MySpace for $35 million, losing something like $545 million on the original purchase in just 6 years. The lesson? MySpace didn't lose because nobody wanted social media anymore. It lost because it got outbuilt, outdesigned, and out-executed by a competitor that simply cared more about the experience than the extraction. All right, zoom out with me for a second. 5 totally different industries: film, video rental, phones, toys, social media. 5 totally different decades. And yet, look closely, and there's this eerie thread running through every single one. Kodak feared cannibalizing their own profits. Blockbuster feared losing their late fee revenue. Nokia kept optimizing hardware while the game moved to software. Toys R Us handed away their digital future for short-term convenience, then got buried by debt they never chose directly. MySpace prioritized extracting value over building value. Notice what's not on that list? None of them failed from a lack of resources. Kodak had the patents. Blockbuster had the cash and the stores. Nokia had the manufacturing scale nobody else could touch. Toys R Us had the brand recognition. MySpace had literally the biggest audience on the internet. They didn't die from weakness. They died from comfort, from protecting what already worked instead of building what would work next. So here's the question I want to leave you with, and genuinely, drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. What's the digital camera in the drawer in your industry right now? The thing that's obviously coming, that everyone can kind of see, but nobody wants to touch because it threatens what's already working. If you liked digging through this wreckage with me, hit subscribe. I'm Caden. This was What Went Wrong. See you in the next one.